I watched a video recently on the news where a nurse in the UK pulled out her own 7 teeth.
Joined now by former NHS nurse Janice Gordon, who resorted to pulling out 7 of her own teeth because she just couldn't get an NHS dentist appointment.
I had a friend recently go down to Mexico for dental treatment. Also, Tanner, you know a dental assistant, or you heard about a dental assistant that got caught doing dental treatment.
Dental offices, a dentist and a dental assistant will have worked together for so long that the dentist gets comfortable with the dental assistant and starts sometimes pressuring them to do things that they should not be doing.
Apple's event. My son came to me yesterday and said, "Did you watch the Apple event?" And I was like, "No. Apple hasn't done anything in a long time. Like, why would I waste my time watching something of them just talking about changing the color of their phones or moving a button or a charging port? I don't care."
Titanium. The same material used in spacecraft design. Makes iPhone 15 Pro and iPhone 15 Pro Max our lightest Pro models ever.
They had the announcement yesterday, and it was the biggest disappointment ever.
That's the one thing I hate about Apple is that they always change their ports and stuff, and then every year you have to buy like another $50 in core. Basically a news story about a nurse. She has been in dental pain for some time, but by the time she tried to schedule to go in, the waiting line was 3 years and to get the work done. NHS, the UK, is basically like Medicaid in the United States. Normally would pay about $300 to get all those teeth pulled through NHS. It seems to be a hot mess, even though it's free.
A dentist can go in and drill out a cavity, and then in most states, a dentist has to go in and actually fill that cavity. But in some states, an EDA can come in and actually fill that cavity. The US does not have monopoly on skill set of dentists.
Welcome back to another episode of Dental Riffs. I'm your host, Gary Bird. I am the founder of SMC National, where we help you create, convert, and close more new patients so you can grow the way that you want.
My name is Tanner Applegate. I am the CEO and founder of Unified Dental. We're a software company bringing together all of the data and programs that you use to make your life a lot simpler.
All right. So we got 4 topics today, and these are really exciting topics. So, and a lot of dental topics today. So number one, I watched a video recently on the news where a nurse in the UK pulled out her own 7 teeth because the waiting line was so long to get into a dentist. Number 2, I had a friend recently go down to Mexico for dental treatment, and they thought that was a better idea than doing it here in the States, and I wanted to talk about that. Also, Tanner, you know a dental assistant, or you heard about a dental assistant that got caught doing dental treatment, and you told me that's a very common thing that you've seen quite often. And then lastly, Apple's event. And so we'll get into that. So what topic do you think we should hit on first?
Let's just kind of get the news stories out of the way, chat through the UK nurse as well as the Oklahoma dental assistant.
Yeah, so let's talk about the nurse in the UK. So I was scrolling through YouTube and I got basically a news story about a nurse, and she has been in dental pain for some time now. She did admit, I'm kind of scared of the dentist, or I'm really scared of the dentist. So I waited too long to go in, but by the time she tried to schedule to go in, the waiting line was 3 years. So it was 3 years to actually get in and be seen by the dentist and to get the work done. Now, if you don't know, NHS in the UK is basically like Medicaid in the United States, and there's basically an abundance of new patients. I actually recently talked to a doctor who owns 40 practices over there, and his practices are about half fee-for-service and half NHS. And he said that there's basically just this huge line of NHS patients, and this person normally would pay about $300 to get all those teeth pulled through NHS. But if she wanted to have all the work done, it would have been way more going private. And she was just really upset with where the system is at over there. And it doesn't seem to be working, especially for dental. Dental, it seems to be a hot mess, even though it's free. It's not working for them. So I thought that was really interesting that someone who's in the medical field would actually go out of their way to pull their own teeth. They were in that much pain.
Hey, I got something crazy to share with you, and I'm going to get you right back to the show, I promise. So we have an event called AlignerCon coming up next year, and this month we're giving away a buy one, get one free. We're going to be partnering with Clear Correct, and this is going to be one of the biggest events that we've ever done in Nashville, Tennessee, in the biggest hotel in America. If you want to come to this, again, we're going to give you a buy one, get one free. We want to meet you in person. Just go to alignercon.com, and we're going to teach you how to create, convert, close, and even some clinical components around clear aligners. So don't miss this event. Go check it out now. Back to the show.
People always say they give hard time for the US for not having national health care access. And every time I see another country that does have national access, it screws up the system pretty bad because of these type of wait times. Like in Chile, when I lived in Chile for 2 years, it was the same thing. They had access for public facilities where you could go in and get public government health care, but they would sit there in pain and suffer for multiple months at a time trying to get access to these appointments just because they don't pay enough to actually incentivize people to do it. And so they can't keep it staffed enough to make sure that there's availability anyway. And so with the NHS, as I've talked to a lot of the dental people that I have connections with in the UK, there actually is a really large shift towards private insurance.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that NHS is going away, but I just think that that's because people are getting fed up with not being able to get treatment, that they're actually saying, hey, as an employer, I want you to provide me with private insurance.
Yeah, I think that's really smart because I didn't dig too deep into it, but I feel like the NHS on the medical side over there is having similar problems. And just from some of the article headlines that I've read when I started Googling this, and it seems to be a big problem. So it's interesting. Yeah, like you said, everybody always complains about the US, but it seems like our system works better. But the thing is you're never going to have a perfect system that gets everybody right. You can't do a system that everything's free and it's for everybody and that works, because that doesn't incentivize people to work in that field and they don't get paid enough and there's not innovation and you get behind the curve on those kind of things. And you don't want to go full fee for service. Everything's just pay, because then it squeezes out a lot of people that way. So there's some kind of hybrid system that has to be in place. I do like that in the US that we do things for the kids. I do like that a lot of the children are taken care of, because that's super important. And I think we have like a split system where Medicaid for adults doesn't really work in the US, but it works for kids, or it seems to be working for kids. What are your thoughts on that?
And Medicaid is state by state too, because there are some adult states that have a lot of benefits where other states don't. Like in Colorado, we actually had really decent Medicaid adult benefits. And so we saw a lot of adult Medicaid because of that, but other states are not that way. And so, yeah, it becomes this issue where even if you do have access to Medicaid, doesn't mean you have access to quality dental care. Right. And then, because honestly, that headline in the US where she's like, hey, my appointments are too long, I'm going to just take them out myself. That headline in the US probably would have been, she couldn't afford it, and so she just took it out herself. It had nothing to do with wait times. It's just the fact that she couldn't afford it, so she had to do it herself. I don't think that she would have had a different outcome in the US if she couldn't have actually afforded the treatment. It's not like there's any better option in the US, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yep. No perfect system. Got to keep working at it. Got to keep trying to make it better. So I wanted to talk about the dental assistant in Oklahoma. So can you kind of break down, just for the audience, first of all, call out the differences between the states? Because I know some states dental assistants can do different things, in other states they can't. So tell the story and then kind of give us a breakdown of dental assistants.
So anybody that works in a dental office will have heard the term expanded functions dental assistant, right? Sometimes they're expanded duties dental assistant, depending on the state that you're in, EDA versus EFTA. But ultimately what it does, it allows dental assistants with some additional training to do some more procedures than they could before. So an example is a dentist can go in and drill out a cavity, and then in most states, a dentist has to go in and actually fill that cavity. But in some states, an EDA can come in and actually fill that cavity. Okay. But what happens is across all the states, all EDAs, there is a line where they cannot do irreversible work on a tooth. Right. So with the example of the filling, they could not actually drill on the tooth to do the filling because that is irreversible once you drill. So a dentist always has to do anything irreversible, and an EDA has the capabilities to do things that are reversible. And that's kind of usually how they draw the line. Right. But what ends up happening is in a lot of these dental offices, a dentist and a dental assistant will have worked together for so long that the dentist gets comfortable with the dental assistant and starts sometimes pressuring them to do things that they should not be doing just because it makes the dentist's life easier. And the dental assistant, a lot of the times, is going to just trust the dentist that they're not going to get themselves in trouble anyways, and they'll do it. And so I think there is obviously the underlying theme here is making sure that you understand as a dental assistant or as a dentist what can and cannot be done. But I think that at the same time, there's some possibility that dental assistant was pressured to do things by the dentist that ended up becoming legal. And in this situation in Oklahoma, multiple patients ended up with severe pain, which if you're in pain, that means you're doing something irreversible. And that's why they sued this dental assistant. And the dental assistant.
Oh, the patient sued? The patient sued?
There's 5 patients suing this single patient. So it's one lawsuit. Well, the patients reported the pain to the Oklahoma Dental Board. And the dental board is suing this
Wow, that must have been some serious
this
pain.
Dental assistant. Right.
Yeah. So they were in serious pain because I mean, I've been in pain when I go to the dentist, right? Things hurt, but I've never even come close to thinking like I should call somebody about this. Right. So they must have been in serious pain to call the dental board. 5 people. That's a lot. I wonder how many people were in pain and didn't call somebody and just called the office and let them know.
That's exactly.
There has to be a ton of people. For 5.
So the lawsuit is primarily the dental assistant, but the dental office is also getting a lawsuit as well. And so I'm curious to see like how many, like for them, yes, it ended up bad where they ended up in dental pain, but how often is this happening where dental assistants are going farther than they should, but it's just not getting reported or there's no issues.
So you get sued. So that's obviously a problem, right? And that's bad. But what's the penalty from like a license standpoint or whatever for a dental assistant that's doing that, or a hygienist or somebody who's crossing that line? What ends up being the penalty?
I think that it can become a federal offense or felony, right? Or misdemeanor. I don't know for sure. Obviously, if you're the supervising provider where you have a license on the line, you can lose that license. But I don't know what, like in this situation, I don't know if the dental assistant was doing it of their own accord and that the dentist can prove themselves innocent or not. I don't really know.
Wow. Okay. That's very interesting and definitely something we'll be keeping an eye on. Okay. I got another topic in the dental field that's interesting. So I had a friend recently that was like, hey, I'm going to go to the dentist because they know I'm in dental marketing. Right. And I'm like, oh, cool. And they're like, but I'm going to Mexico. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, I got an ad from a guy. He lives here in the US, actually, lives in San Diego. And he runs an office down in Mexico, and it's just way cheaper. Everything's way cheaper. But he's a guy from the US, and he has great Yelp reviews and Google reviews. And yeah, I'm going to go check him out. And so he ended up documenting it and videoing it. I haven't watched all the video yet. He hasn't edited and broke it down. But I just thought it was an interesting thought. Like, I've always been super scared of like dental tourism and going to another country, especially just for like if something happens. But then I was like, well, if it's in Mexico, right down the street, like right across the border and not that far, and you're doing a lot of work, and the guy's from the United States, and here's the other thing I've seen, Tanner. I've seen people who own practices on both sides of the border, so both sides of the U.S. and of Mexico, and so I just thought it was interesting. It's kind of a shift for me mentally, where the first time that I actually even considered, not that I would, but I considered like, oh, that might be a viable option.
So let me just talk through some of this then, because this is interesting to me that you're not that you're willing to do this yourself yet, but it seems like you're a little bit more pro it after this.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I understand that like the U.S. does not have a monopoly on skill sets of dentists, right? It's not like we are the only ones that can produce good dentists, and if you don't practice in the U.S., you're going to screw up everything that you do, right? I'll acknowledge that. But the thing though that makes me nervous is, especially like, let's take the example of the dental office that has it stateside and then has it across the border. In that example, what is the benefit to this provider for doing it across the board in Mexico, right? Why would the provider want to do that?
I don't know, but I'm going to guess. So I'm going to guess that in the U.S., especially in California, and especially in Southern California, the cost of living, the cost of owning the building, and the overbearing like regulation of just running business, not just dental and medical, but just the overbearing cost of running a business and taxes.
So it sounds
and all
like
those.
he's still running a business.
He is, yeah. But in
right?
Mexico.
And so but didn't you say he's got an office on both sides?
I've heard of that. But this guy, I don't know.
Okay.
The one that he went
But
to,
even,
I don't know.
Even that though, to me, what comes to my mind is I can reduce the cost of what I'm doing because I can reduce the regulation that I have to abide by,
or rent too,
or rent.
So
right.
you might pay $7,000 to $12,000 for a decent office in Southern California, or you might go over on the other side of the border and pay $2,000. I'm guessing $2,000.
Right, and yes, I would agree that ultimately, like, it's going to be a lower cost of running the business, but still, from a percentage of expense standpoint, it still probably come out fairly even. Right, you can't charge as much now, and so yes, you've got reduced costs of labor, supplies, whatever it is. But the reality is, like, the biggest difference in my mind is that I'm skirting around the regulation that I have to abide by in the U.S. And to me, as a patient, that is what I'm concerned about, is like, what regulations is this provider no longer having to abide by that I would have wanted them to abide by?
Yeah. I'm not, that's always my biggest concern, is that I'm not smart enough to know what rules they may or may not be breaking in the bigger scheme of things to be able to go there. So definitely not saying that I would do it. I've just, for the first time, I was like, oh, that makes sense why somebody's doing it. For me, it's always like, well, if I'm going to save $1,000, I'd rather do it in the U.S. But that's a great point where you're calling out as well.
Another interesting topic, though, I guess I would ask about is your friend that saw this advertisement. Is he advertising Mexico dental work in the States, and is that legal?
I think so. I don't think that you could stop somebody in Mexico advertising something in the U.S.
Don't we have marketing like HIPAA, not HIPAA, but just kind of professional service laws in the first place?
I mean, I'm sure there's rules and stuff, but I don't think you can stop somebody from posting on Instagram that I own a dental office in Mexico.
Interesting.
I agree with. And then you being in proximity of that and then boosting it, spending a couple bucks to boost it.
That's what I'm curious about, is can they legally boost things like that?
I'm sure. I mean, it's country by country, right? So like there's other countries that have really strict rules on marketing for medical stuff. Canada is one of them, right? Like the rules there are more strict on what you can market and what you can't, but that's in Canada. So you can, if I'm in the US and if I had a client in the US that was near the Canadian border, I would just, I'd just market to the people in Canada. It wouldn't be a big deal. That's how I think of it. So I don't think there's anything the U.S. can do to stop somebody from doing that kind of marketing.
Right. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Cool. So last thing, would you go overseas? Let me ask you a question. What country would you be willing to go do dental work in outside of the U.S.?
Korea.
Okay. Yep. All right, that's a good answer.
The only time I'd go do dental work is if I wanted a cosmetic procedure at a cheaper price. And I don't know why, but I'm like, oh, the Koreans have got it figured out.
They do. Yeah, they
I'll go
do.
to South Korea.
The South Koreans have a lot of stuff figured out. Hey, sorry to interrupt the show, but this is a segment that I think is going to bring a lot of value to you and it's going to help you grow your practice. It's called Ask Gary, and people are emailing their questions in about their marketing to askgary@smcnational.com, or you can DM us or leave a comment below. We'll grab those. Here's the question for today from Jeff. How many months before opening would you start marketing for a de novo? And this is a really good question. And it's kind of complex, right? Because there's certain things that you just can't do too early, and there's certain things that you just can't do fast enough. So let's just work through some of those. So obviously, like signage, anything on the front of the building, all that like in-person marketing that you're going to be doing right on the practice has to be done as soon as possible. You literally cannot do that fast enough, because the faster you get those signs up, the faster you get that external marketing up, the better. The next thing that you can start to do is, as you get closer to opening the practice, so we're talking 3 months, 4 months before, is you can start dropping like postcards and different kind of media like that, flyers to surrounding businesses, but you have to think through how those people are going to reach out to you. So you got to have some kind of special phone line or direct them to another office that's going to answer the phones. So you can start to fill those opportunities as people want to sign up as a patient. Now for digital, you really can't start marketing it too soon because people don't want to wait months and months to come into a dental office. So usually about a month before you open up, you really want to pepper with social and ads on Google and things like that, because now you can start signing people up and you can start driving in new customers. But again, if you go too far out or you try to do that too soon, you're going to lose a lot of money because people are going to call, they're going to answer the phone, and you're going to try to put them 2 months out. People aren't going to want to do that. So that's today's. If you have a question, email us at askgary@smcnational.com. Back to the show. Okay, so let's talk about real quickly the Apple event. What happened?
Yeah.
What happened there? I'll just tell you this. My son came to me yesterday and said, "Did you watch the Apple event?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "Why not?" And I was like, Apple hasn't done anything in a long time. Like, why would I waste my time watching something of them just talking about changing the color of their phones or moving a button or a charging port? I don't care.
So that was so I do and always have. Like I remember once when I was young, probably I think I was in high school, I was definitely in high school when they announced the first iPhone. And I remember downloading, because I didn't have time to watch it, downloading the web, like the first Steve Jobs event and adding it to my video iPod at the time, and then watching it at this event that I went to. And the whole event was just fascinating to me about how he presented it. And it's gone down really well in kind of like the histories of like, they completely changed how you release new stuff across all companies. Right, Facebook now does these launch events, Google, et cetera. But Steve Jobs and Apple was kind of the first one. And so over the years, Apple obviously has had to keep up with this innovation, this expectation of innovation. And a lot of people thought when Steve Jobs died that Apple was going to kill off because they weren't going to be able to keep up with that innovation. But since then, even if you look at the products that have been released with Tim Cook in charge, they've actually done more than with Steve Jobs in charge. So I think the last product that Steve Jobs announced was the iPad, and he had started working on the Apple Watch, but it came out after. But then some of the biggest products that have come out from Apple since then have been the AirPods and that whole line of products as well. And those are some of the biggest products that they have from a revenue perspective.
Which is
right?
cool,
And
but it's
so-
not like, those aren't, AirPods to me that's not like a groundbreaking technology thing like the iPhone, the iPad, some of the other stuff that
but
they've.
honestly, to a degree of how you're looking at it, neither were those. The iPhone was, because prior to that, any touchscreen was just crap.
Yeah.
Right. So they really kind of changed that. But the iPad, like it was a mediocre product when it came out compared to other tablets. Samsung's products were way better at the time.
I remember that.
And
yeah.
so really they just kind of said, hey, we're going to give you a better ecosystem and we'll give you this platform. But it's not like they innovated or did anything unique or new in that platform. And then the same thing with the AirPods. I have always been an audiophile. Like I love headphones. If you ask my wife what's her biggest pet peeve, is the fact that I'm always buying new headphones. And prior to that, I would constantly try a lot of these sound ones. And the problem with the sound isolation prior to at least the Pros was the fact that you had to have power. So you had to be plugged in. And so the AirPod Pros, when they came out, they did revolutionize the sound isolation on a wireless front that no other headphone really had at that time. So that was, at least for me, one of the biggest things. But anyway, so they had the announcement yesterday, and it was the biggest disappointment ever, right? Nothing really came out. The two things that they announced that everyone kind of jokes about is with Apple Watch, they released a new functionality where you can do this and it'll interact with your watch, right? So let's say you're getting a call. If you do this, it'll answer your call for you. Okay. And then the second one was that they switched from Lightning ports to USB-Cs for their new iPhones. And the funny thing about both of those is that this whole motion thing already existed. It's already a setting that you can go in and turn on right now in your your Apple Watch. So the fact that they announced it as this new thing, everyone's burning them over that. And then the second part of the fact that they had to switch to USB-C, they announced it as some new revolutionary idea, but the reality is like the European Union forced them to switch that standard.
Is that
EU
so?
came to them and said, you cannot sell iPhones in the EU if you do not get onto the standardized port, which is the USB-C.
Oh, so they're all going back to all the old standard.
Well, the USB-C is what like their MacBooks are charged with. It's what their iPads are charged with. So now they're going to the phone charging with it, etc. So yes.
Yeah, that's the one thing I hate about Apple is that they always change their ports and stuff, and then every year you have to buy like another $50 in cords every time. Like, well,
you could be grateful to the EU because that's going to stop.
Let's go. So I can use all my laptop chargers now on the phone.
You can use your laptop chargers on your phone, iPad, whatever. Yep.
Let's go. EU for the win. They messed up on the NHS, but they're doing a good job here. So good job on closing the loop on that.
You just got to drop $1,000 to get a new phone.
Oh, that's
with no other big benefit. It's seriously like no other difference. It was ridiculous.
That I feel like the last two phones, like the 2 phones ago, I was like, did you get the new phone? I'm like, no, I don't. I literally don't see why I would get the new phone. I don't. Besides them throttling, they throttle the old phones. That's one reason to get a new phone is that they start slowing down.
The question though that I have is the consumer's expectations of the rate of innovation unrealistic?
So what do you mean by that?
Right. Like you're saying, oh, they haven't given us anything good or exciting in the last 2 years, but they've except for honestly, maybe this event, they have developed and released new things. Like the 13 really is different than the 14, but in our eyes, like, oh, well, there's not much innovation. I don't need it. Right. So our expectations are you need to develop and release more. Otherwise, I'm not going to be interested in it. And so is our rate of expectation of innovation the unrealistic part of it?
Yeah, that's a good point. Because for me, I'm just like, does it do everything for me? So like, right. I just want to be like, hey, Siri, do this for me and tell me all this. And it has ChatGPT all built in it. And right now I have half the time I say, hey, Siri, and ask it something. And it goes, oh, the iPhone can't do that. I'm like, you're stupid. ChatGPT can.
Ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's so bad.
It's bad. I'm just like, what do you mean you can't tell me what the score of this game was or these stats or whatever, right? While I'm driving, like I want to know this information. And then I'm like, ChatGPT can, but I can't use my voice. Like all that should just work together. It doesn't yet, but it will soon. So I'm just waiting for Tesla's phone to come out.
I guess there's the Apple rumor. If you ever want to go down the Apple rumor thing, that's something that I keep myself involved in for some reason. But there's a rumor that Apple is putting tons of money into a ChatGPT alternative, and I'm interested to see what they do with that.
Okay.
First off, you're right. They got to fix Siri.
Yeah. So ChatGPT, you can now put your personal information in it, and it totally changes how you use it. Have you done that?
I haven't done it yet because I feel like I've got too many versions of myself.
So
it has interacting with it.
Yeah, no, you can actually put all that in. So I'm like, here's my business. This is what my goals are. Here's my family size. Here's what English level I want you to write at. I want you to write at like a high school English level. Here's where I go to church. Here's where I do this. Here's all my goals. Here's the language that I want you to use. And it spits it all out. And now I don't have to tell it over and over and over again to fix things. And it automatically pulls from all that. It's really cool.
Yeah, it is. That is something that I've intended to do. Maybe I'll just go have ChatGPT write my own instructions.
All right, man. Have a good one.
All right. Peace.